this morning to announce that I'm leaving emergency management. Oh, yeah. I've got the job. I've got the job coming up. I'm going to be the new chief of police of the city of San Francisco. That's my goal. And before you get excited, let me explain why, okay? I've studied this the last few months, and I figured out what is it that cops do, right? Cops patrol. I worked my way through college and graduate school as a security guard, driving a car, driving patrol. I know patrol. Cops carry guns. I carried guns, when I was a security guard. And in the Army, they gave me some really neat stuff to play with, so I know guns. I can handle that. I did retail security for Bloomingdale's, so I did a lot of internal investigations. Cops do investigations. I was what we called an auxiliary officer in Arizona, where I got to, we weren't reserve officers, but we got to drive the cars to the car wash. So I've driven patrol cars. Let's see, what else do police do? Well, talk to citizens, do that all the time. So I think I'm the candidate. I grew up in San Francisco, unlike a lot of police officers in San Francisco, I actually live in the city. So I think that I'm the perfect candidate. And you're all looking at me like I've taken leave of my senses and I've gone nuts. And I'm sure somebody out there sooner or later is going to ask me who ghost wrote my book, because obviously you're such an idiot you couldn't have done this yourself. And you'd be right, because obviously to be the chief of police of a city like San Francisco, you have to do more than just understand the tasks that are required of a police department. There are some intangibles that go on with that. So the question I have is, if that is true of a police department, and certainly by extension a fire department, a public health, any other department, why is it the same elected officials that will hold to those standards continually insist on categorizing us in emergency management, not by who we are and what we provide in terms of value, but rather by the functions that we are expected to perform in our program? So I'd like to keep that in mind as we talk this morning. What is emergency management? How do we define ourselves? What makes us different from other folks? And it's not this traditional approach of saying, because we do certain tasks, we're emergency managers. There's an intangible that I think we need to take away from it. So let me kind of make that case for you and see if, and no, I'm not really going to be the chief of police, so if anybody didn't figure I was joking about it. That's what I used to call them in San Francisco, because there was always a flavor of the month. Somebody would come in, oh my God, Y2K is coming. Like, oh. Great, but that's 2 years down the road. What do we care? No. So, but last year before Y2K, it's the flavor of the month. Everybody's excited about Y2K. Well, we started planning a year ago, just because it's 3 months away. And I used to love going to these meetings. I'm sure you all attended them, right? It's the end of the world, we know it. And like, explain something to me. Is all the food going to vaporize at midnight? Well, no. Well, so there'll still be food in the supermarkets. Well, yeah, but they won't be able to get it. Wait a minute. Safeway has a vested interest in making sure that truck gets there every morning with the groceries. There are no groceries, they don't sell. They don't sell, they don't make money, they don't make money, they all go bankrupt. So believe me, if there's a problem with the road network, Safeway's going to figure a workaround. If the trains aren't running, Safeway's going to figure a way to put it on trucks and get it in. Yeah? I imagine there are some guys at Safeway that if you had to take horse-drawn carts and bring it in, they'd get it in there because they're looking to make a profit. So, what exactly is the problem? I tell you what, let's leave the food issue alone. What's going to happen to the water in San Francisco? Oh, yeah, water. It's a big thing in California, by the way, water. We fight over it. Water wars are coming. You heard it here first. So, water. Gravity fed in San Francisco. It starts in the mountains, it flows down. We do very little pumping, right? So, for some reason our pumps don't work, we still have water. Now, you may not get it up to the 13th floor or wherever the top of your penthouse, but you're going to have water. How many buildings are coming down? Oh, gee, Lou, nothing's going to collapse. So what's my problem? Honest to God, we sat down a year before, we got all our planners in, and we went through this whole thing, and we thought about a lot of things, and it finally came down to our biggest concern was we're going to throw the world's biggest party. And everybody thinks it's the end of the world, so they're really going to party hard. We had so many people on the streets, it was actually, some poor guy decided to run down the Embarcadero and break in windows on cars, and he got stomped, not by one police officer, not by two police officers, an entire platoon, because they were bored. So, what was my point about all that? The flavor of the month. The flavor of the month was Y2K. We had already done our planning. September 11th. Oh my God, we got to plan for terrorism, Lou. It's the flavor of the month. And yeah, what part of Metropolitan Medical Task Force don't you understand? We've been working on that for 2 years. We do have a response capacity. And like, oh, you're such a god. No, I'm not a god. I just do my job, you know? Keep focused on issues. So the point of understanding punctuated equilibrium is this idea of keep your eye on the ball. Don't let the flavor of the month get you going too far down the garden path. Pandemic flu. Oh, that's a new one for us, right? Plague of Justinian mean anything to anybody? 6th century. It wipes out most of the known world. Rome falls. They can't recover the old city of Rome. Essentially, it's the end of the world as they knew it. But somehow we're here. But thank God that never happened again until the Black Death. Middle Ages, third of Europe wiped out. Good time to be if you were a survivor, great economic times. We started seeing hired labor after that. So again, we can predict some of these things. We know these things are coming. If we as emergency managers do commit to all hazards planning, if we do kind of keep our eye on the ball, if we do try to be the steadying influence, we can in fact think and anticipate for some of these things. All right. One of the things that you have to do is, as we talked about earlier, is add value to the community. How do you add value to the community? You have to show that you're contributing something. If you can help with risk management, that has a direct impact on the community. Why? Reduced premiums, you know, maybe your community is self-insured, less risk, you know, a lot of good things. You can make a case for why your office is important. What do? We hang around and look good just in case there's a disaster. And meanwhile, we do plans and exercises. Great, you're off the budget. And then, whoa, you know, we're actually a cost savings measure. What? You cost me $3 million a year. Right. Oh, no, but you have to look at us in terms of we're part of the risk management structure. We're going to reduce the impacts of disasters on this jurisdiction. We're going to help make sure that if a disaster does hit, that things aren't as bad as they do, and we can do a quick recovery, get the tax base up, you know, all the stuff we've been talking about. So this idea of tying into the community. And by the way, when we're talking about vision, a lot of communities have vision statements. Can you tie into the community's vision statement? That's another way of looking and adding value. I remember I was doing some work with a biotech company, and the big thing they were looking at in their emergency management, how do we add value to the company? And I was stressing that. And the question came up, well, let's look at the company vision statement. And one of the things the company had in its vision statement is, we will continue to provide our services no matter what. In other words, if you're depending on us for our drug products, they're going to be there no matter what. Oh, could I hang an emergency management program on that vision statement? Yeah. How are you going to do this, boss? Oh, well, we just keep thinking. What about an earthquake? Oh, well, that's what I do. Oh, so you help us achieve our vision. Yeah, there you go. Look kindly on my budget next year. So again, let's talk about performance objectives. Now, you will get disagreements from many, many people about what should be in a performance objective. So your mileage may vary on it. This is what I personally recommend to folks, and it's specific in a couple of things that are different from what you normally find. First of all is define what it is. What is it we want to do? Pretty straightforward. Now, let's also not give it too big a thing. You know, too big a definition, it may as well be a goal, because it's something you can't get your hands around. It needs something that can actually be done. Right? And now we're starting to talk about work products. We're talking about, it could be do a plan, conduct a seminar, do training, whatever. We're starting to get to the nitty-gritty of how do I achieve the goal. These are the 10 or 12 things that need to be done. The second is, how will we know it's done? Right? It's amazing how many people put together these, well, how will you know? Sometimes it's really obvious. Like, if my goal is to write a mitigation plan, I'll know it's done when the mitigation plan is written, right? Well, that's pretty straightforward. But you may want to put some qualifiers on it. The mitigation plan has to be completed. The mitigation plan has to be accepted by FEMA, has to be approved by the city council. You need to kind of think through that just a little bit to say, when will we consider this done? Okay? It'll be done when we have an acceptable mitigation plan. And acceptable is defined as such and such and such and such and such and such, right? We are going to conduct a new build a new emergency operations center is our goal. And so we're going to let a contract for that. Well, how will we define when that's done? Well, when the contract is signed. Right? And not that difficult when we start breaking things down. But a lot of times people don't know how to signal the end of a project. This works, by the way, when you're doing your work plan for your own individual staff. We used to always try to identify metrics so that we know when a particular job was done and we could kind of keep people on track. Next thing is who's going to do it. That's kind of a no-brainer. And generally, you want to try and avoid committees. You know, it's okay to say a committee, but you need to assign fixed responsibility. Why? Because we want to be able to hold somebody accountable for this. We want to be able, when it isn't happening, you want to be able to go and do, you know, the wingtip two-step. That's hard to say. On the individual and get their attention and get them back on track. And it's really hard to do is, well, it's the committee. Well, yeah, but the committee chair is gone now. There's a new committee chair. He didn't know anything about it. When's the last time the committee met? Well, the committee hasn't met because the new committee chair hasn't called the meeting. Well, when's he going to call a meeting? Well, he hasn't figured that out yet. Because he's got to have a meeting with somebody else before he can decide when to have the meeting with the committee. And so things are, well, the bottom line is we're not sure when this is going to get done. What? Who can I go slap about this? Well, nobody really. It's not the guy's fault, and it's not them. If we were saying, look, the Department of Public Works is responsible for this, doesn't matter who's the head or whether that's changed, I can go to the head of the Department of Public Works and I can say, you guys agreed to do this, it hasn't been done, need your help. Right? So again, we really want to define that action agent as somebody that we can go back and say, you know, yeah, it's a committee, but heading up the committee is the police department. Yeah, so I'm going after the police department. Timeline, well, when will it be completed? And I'm not so concerned about dates, but at least in what year. If we're doing a multi-year plan at 5 years, are we going to do it the first year? Are we going to do it the second year, the fifth year? You know, is it an ongoing thing? We're going to do so much each year? Some sort of timeline of what we can expect. And built into with that, of course, there's some sort of milestones. You may want to designate some milestones as part of that performance objective, as part of the timeline. Okay, and this is where I've kind of part company with some of my folks. I think you need to figure out a cost. A lot of people say, no, we don't. It's just a strategic plan, Lou. No. You need to have at least a rough approximation of what that cost is going to be. Otherwise, it isn't real. I can say, as I said earlier, we are going to have the resources on hand to rebuild this entire city. Not Alabaster, by God, we're going to rebuild it in Carrara marble. Anybody take that seriously? Of course not. Because you know, we'll never get money for that. So if I haven't figured out a cost, it doesn't really exist. And if I haven't figured out how I'm going to pay for it, it really doesn't exist. What's going to happen when you take a strategic plan into your boss and say, I'd like to sign off on this? And he looks down and like, what's all this? What are the first two things he's going to ask you? What's it going to cost? How are you going to pay for it? Wouldn't you? That's how I do it. You know, people, hey, boss, we think we should get what's it cost? Do we have money for that? Are we going to get a grant for it? How are we going to pay for it? Doesn't have to be precise. Doesn't have to be exact. This isn't your budget request. This is giving a sort of an order of magnitude so that the decision makers that you want to sign off on your strategic plan have something to hang their hat on. If you go in and you've come up with a first-year budget that looks like it's going to be several $1 billion, what's your boss going to say? Ain't happening, no way, it's kind of squirrely. What are you doing in here in the first place? Get back out. So what that'll actually help you do at the end is you start pulling your strategic plan together. Say, folks, this is really way too much. We'll never get funding for this. We can't identify funding sources. Let's rework the strategy. Right? You now have an opportunity to go back and rework the strategy before you put it to a vote, before you get approval. You do your homework. Okay? So that's why I think approaching a performance objective in this manner really helps you get ahead of the game, because you already have done the homework that people are going to ask you about. Otherwise, it's not real. You're not taken seriously, because you're walking in and it's another feel-good. You have to have a certain amount of access. It was very, very difficult in San Francisco because our mayor had gatekeepers. He had a chief of staff and a deputy chief of staff, and none of them wanted to give you appointments. But I found that I could make an appointment directly. And the first time I did it, they were all over me, but you know, I said, look, you know, I gave you an opportunity to resolve it. And one of the things that the mayor didn't downcheck me. He felt I should have access to him. And so I think a lot of it starts with, as soon as they come in, I think you've got to get in there and you've got to talk to them. Every time we had a new member of the board of supervisor, I'd go over there and I would personally introduce myself. I would offer them a tour of the EOC. Most of them wouldn't take me up on it. And I'd make sure I had about a half hour to give them emergency management 101. I talk until their eyes glaze over. And some folks, you realize, this guy's never going to get it. And you figure out how you're going to work around it. And others, you know, okay, this is going to be an ally. I had one member of the board that came over. He sat with me for an hour and a half in the EOC. Just kept asking me questions. He was fascinated by it. He became a good ally, a good friend. He's now in the legislature in California. So if I ever need somebody in the legislature, yeah, that's who you know. There really is no easy way because each person is different and you have to figure out how you're going to get to them. And sometimes it's by getting somebody else that's attached and you kind of ride in on their coattails. Sometimes it's just insinuating yourself in where you really don't belong, but you know, you should be there sort of thing. And after a while, people just expect you to be there. When they hold press conferences, and anytime the chief of police and chief of fire was there, I was standing there. Didn't say anything, but you know, I looked good. And so things like that, I think that's how you get them. But ultimately, and I do a whole presentation on elected officials, what really moves elected officials is, what's in this for me? And if you're convincing them, you let me have my way, you won't be bothered, then that's a big plus for them. Most of them they really don't care in the sense that they don't want to be bothered with it. So they'll look to you to run things for them. The most effective way of working with an elected official I found is just what we used to do in the military. You don't walk in with a problem. I never, ever walked into Mayor Brown with a problem. What I walked in was with a problem and several solutions and a recommendation as to which solution I wanted to implement. Now, sometimes he would say, I need more information. Sometimes he would say, go for it. Sometimes he would say, are you out of your mind? And he'd come up with something new. But the fact was, he never had to, why are you dumping this on me? Have that attitude.